Feel free to come join us. Come on in, folks. Um, we'd like to get started today with our first speaker. Sandy Howell is the Senior VP of Global Marketing for Eris, and she is a Penn State alum. And she's here to talk to us today about building the Eris brand. And take it away, Sandy.
Great. Thank you so much. Well, I'm Sandy Howell with Eris, and I'm over global marketing. And when I was 8 years old, I told my parents I was going to come to Penn State main campus as a freshman and major in education and be a teacher. So I was right about one of those things. I did come to Penn State. It's a great place to be. So I want to share with you today an overview, a little more about Eris, as we're a technology company, some of the marketing and branding importance, and then also leave you with a few tips as you look into your future career. So first, before we get going, who's heard of Eris? This is really good in this room, so you guys are the technology people. So let me share with you a video to show you a little bit more about who we are.
The people of Eris believe in technology. We love the experiences it gives us, the places it takes us. We're inspired by each amazing advance that lights up our eyes and ignites our imaginations. We know that every marvel fades away, replaced by the next. But each one is a milestone in the human journey of constant innovation. And we're driving the cycle. Because we all...
Oops.
of Eris believe in technology. We love the experiences it gives us, the places it takes us. We're inspired by each amazing advance that lights up our eyes and ignites our imaginations. We know that every marvel fades away, replaced by the next. But each one is a milestone in the human journey of constant innovation. And we're driving the cycle. Because we all know that our most far-fetched dreams will quickly become our minimum expectations. This is how technology works. Every step forward is followed by the next. It never ends. It's not supposed to. This is what drives us to deliver the most unforgettable experiences. The moments that make us gasp, laugh, celebrate, understand, and dream of extending our control over our surroundings as far as it can possibly go. In our business, success comes from collaborating with our customers to push beyond the expected to the next big breakthrough until every corner of human experience is within our reach. That's what we do. We invent the future. Eris.
So this room is very unusual. Usually when I ask how many people have heard of Eris, it's about 10%. And our CEO has a great statement that he often uses, and that is, if you have digital TV or high-speed data, and some of you told me today you have our cable modems in your home, that you're using Eris equipment. We are the largest provider to help power the networks and the homes for digital and high-speed data. So if you have service from a Verizon or Comcast, for example, you're using our equipment. So Eris is a global innovator of IP. We are very focused on video and broadband technology. We're a $5.3 billion company. We have over 1,000 customers, 84 offices around the world. We have over 6,000 employees and 2,000 patents. If you would have invested $100 in Eris 2 years ago, that would be over $220 today, outperforming Apple. But you haven't heard of us. The BBC had this quote, "Eris is probably one of the biggest companies that you've never heard of." So for my team, this is job security, but also a very large challenge. It's our challenge to get people to know who Eris is around the world, both business to business as well as business to consumer. So, what brands inspire you? What are some of the brands? I see Penn State is a good inspiring brand. I see lots of apples in the audience. And what's the one thing about a brand that is meaningful? That one thing is trust. A brand is all about what you trust. If you go to Yield College Diner and get grilled stickies, you know what those grilled stickies are going to be like. You know how good they're going to be, and it's exactly what you expected. And that's what building a brand is all about. Who watches Mad Men in here? So not quite as many. This is the tech audience. So Mad Men is a TV show that depicts the 1950s and 60s in the advertising age. The men wear very sharp suits. It's all male dominated, and it's all about TV advertising, billboard advertising. It's kind of old-fashioned advertising. And that is something that technology has truly changed today, how consumers are approached. Today, it's about likes. You all want likes. Eris, we want likes. We want people to spend time on our website. We want to understand the path they travel. Every piece of the digital footprint is known. But this is truly what measures a company's success today. And to get that time spent on the website, you need compelling content. So that is key. We started about a year and a half ago with a complete brand refresh. And this was something very foreign to a technology company. We had just acquired a company that we were $1 billion company. We're now over $5 billion in 2 years. That's big growth. And we had to come up with some branding. We started by asking customers and employees, what makes Eris different? And I believe you'll be very surprised, as we were. You would think in a technology company, that answer would be great technology, great products, innovation. It was all about the people of Eris. They're there to collaborate, work with us, and innovate. And that's what was resounding, whether it was employees or customers. So with that, we started building an entire brand refresh around the people of Eris, collaborating to invent the future. We had 3 goals in the refresh. 1, we wanted to drive recognition globally for Eris. We wanted to make sure we were the industry leader. We also wanted to build stories using our people, making us unique compared to other technology companies that focus on their technology. And the third thing we wanted to do was focus on our employees, because guess what? They're our cheerleaders, and we have over 6,500 cheering for us. So we started with the We Are Eris. This we did in some print media. We also did it online. We had our experts, our engineers, our innovators telling who they are, what they do, and how they're innovating. All over the world, we took this campaign. The same people you see here are the same people that if you went to a trade show or had some expert on those subjects come to your office, in China, in Europe, in Cala. It would be the people in those ads. So very real, very truthful advertising. We also then went and expanded on collaboration, because that's the other thing that came out of all our research, is how our customers knew we worked with them. We collaborated. So we wanted to show imagery, again, of using our people, collaborating, showing that working together. And different for a technology company, we will actually spend more time on our people as much as our product in advertising. So you'll see both, because the people's what's key and our differentiator. So to get those internal 6,500 cheerleaders, we took 2,600 of their images and made our logo. And this logo's in all our different buildings. We use it all over. But we wanted to use our people. It's the engineers, it's the marketers, it's the salespeople, it's the finance people. They're all working together with our customers to invent the future. We then had kind of a curveball for Eris and ventured in here at the very end of 2014 into our first sports marketing. This is very foreign to a technology company to spend money on sports marketing. But we had all the stars align. Joe Gibbs Racing, which is one of the most ethical racing teams. He's a Super Bowl coach, if you know him, fantastic person to work with. He approached us, as well as two of our largest customers, to come into NASCAR. And I thought, what a better way to build our brand. We have our brand that's pretty well known, business to business, but we do have a business to consumer product, and what a way to get out there in front of our consumers with our customers. So we have, you may have heard of Carl Edwards, is our driver in the Sprint Cup Series, and we have one of the first Mexican drivers in the Xfinity Series. And we then went, what is our consumer brand? We had to develop it. And we started again with, when you look at building a brand, it's about the truth. And Eris is the #1 provider of cable modems in North America. We're the leader. So it was easy to come up with the tagline, first place modems. It's true. We had that. And so we built upon that. And let me show you what we did to build our internal cheerleaders with the brand in racing. So it's taking the people of Eris, taking that campaign. You can see what we've done for our business to business, and now this is for our business to consumer. And it's all about our people again. So let's change gears a little bit. We talked about some great brands. And, you know, what is your brand? As you are at this very exciting time in your career looking to branch out, what is it? When I was first asked that question, I was in a very big interview within Cisco for a senior vice president job, which is very high. It would be like a president level at a lot of companies. And at Cisco, they asked me, what would this executive at Time Warner Cable say about you? I was a deer in the headlights. I was speechless, which is very rare. It was tough. So I would encourage you to think about your brand. When you look at your career, you're at a great, great starting place. Penn State. And believe me, always you'll be Penn State proud. But your career is not necessarily a straight line, as you'll see. For me personally, my career went from when I thought Actually, I wanted to be in fashion merchandising, and I went home at Christmas, and I remember going to my parents, what am I going to do? I don't want to do what I thought I wanted to do. I got the job offer, by the way, too, but I didn't want the job. And my father probably gave me the absolute best advice. He said, go into technical sales and know it better than any man in that room, because you will be different. So I left Penn State. I started at a very small technical startup. I was the 21st employee. I wasn't sure if this company was going to be around, but it was an amazing team because my boss there is now an executive at Google, and we grew it from 21 employees to 200 people, and in 5 years we sold it for over $20 million. And at that time I was at another crossroad. Did I want to stay in this small company or go work for one of the largest companies in my industry, which was called Scientific Atlanta? That was a $1 billion company. So I went from 20 million to $1 billion. Worked there. We grew while I was there to almost $4 billion. Cisco bought us. It was their largest acquisition they had done. I stayed several years with Cisco until Eris called me. And Eris called because they wanted to start business development, and I had been doing business development for a $1 billion account, so they were curious if I could come and help a $1 billion company. So I took that opportunity and joined Eris, and the curveball of latest is in less than a year and a half ago, they asked me to take over global marketing. So how you go from sales to, I was in sales engineering at one time, to business development to marketing, I will assure you that most careers are not a straight path. So I want to leave you with about 5 tips. And the first is to do your homework. And I will tell you, I was doing my homework on the way here. I typically use my flying time to read, especially during takeoff and landing. And in technology, you will always be studying. I also encourage you to do your homework as you're looking at new industries. Here we are, a company you might not have heard of. And how many other companies in large industries have you not heard of? And there's so many industries that are so big, and they have so many smaller companies servicing them. There's a lot of opportunities once you start looking. And the other thing about that is I would encourage you to research. You have the internet. Look at what they're saying to their investors and on the investors section. Look at the annual reports. There's a lot of great information there for companies that you're looking at. The next word of advice is to visualize your goals and be courageous. I'm a big one about taking risk. I took a risk to come into marketing without a marketing degree. And it's a real key. Every time you work outside of that comfort zone, that's a time you grow. And there's a lot of opportunities. And don't be afraid of hard work and studying more. Like I said, homework doesn't end when you leave Penn State. The third thing I would encourage you is to build your brand. Think about, what is your brand? What do people say about you? Listen. And as you build a brand, the best thing that happens is people start talking about you. And when Eris, the CEO, was looking for somebody to lead business development, it was interesting because he shared with me that several other CEOs in the industry actually suggested that he call me. And that is a good way to get an introduction. It's also a little surprising when at 4 o'clock, when you are working from home in your shorts and flip-flops, when you get a call from the CEO of a billion-dollar company asking to come and see you. The key is, again, be fearless and say yes and go for it. The next item of advice is your career is not a straight line. And I actually would tell you, I believe it's a jungle gym. Whoever came up with this career ladder, throw it out. And just like jungle gyms, sometimes you have to go backwards before you go forward. Sometimes you go over to the side before forward. It's not just straight up. And you sometimes get better skill sets when you go sideways for a little bit. But go out of that comfort zone. Know it's not a straight line. I actually, going from that small $20 million company to $1 billion, I took a step backwards in title and responsibility. And that was a hard thing to do, but it's what I knew I had to do to get into that big company. And finally, you'll achieve your goals with others around you. I'm a big believer in you reap what you sow. You surround yourself with a great team, and if you work with people that you care about, it makes your work so much easier. So really think about building good teams, working. When you work with your friends, work couldn't be any better. So in closing, I know you're going to leave thinking about your brand. I want you to think about doing your homework, taking the right path. You know it's not going to be a straight line. Take those risks. Keep your goal ahead of you. But I will share the number one key to success is to do what you love. And if you love what you do, it'll be very easy, and you're going to have a grand time in your career. With that, I will wrap up, and thank you for having me, and we have some time, I believe, for some Q&A. So any questions as you're starting out? Well, that's a good question. So as we're looking to go into retail, how are we going to compete against the Cisco's and Linksys? Well, to get that 2 years of growth, we acquired Motorola, which is a pretty well-known brand. But that's not a brand that we own long-term. So we have to build the Aris brand. And we're doing that through NASCAR. Modems, we are the number one. If you do any type of research, our modems come up as the top. And that's where those likes are so important, because we actually know from research that people are looking at those likes more than they're looking at anything else about what modem's the best. So the more consumer reports and, from people themselves responding, and we know people go into the store and look in the store, what's the top modem? That's a common search. And we know they're actually in the store when they're looking at that, because that's what technology does. So that's one big key. The other thing that's really going to be a stretch for us this year is for cable modems, we're the leader. We're getting ready to enter a very busy space of Wi-Fi routers. But I truly think you'll see our product is completely differentiated, because if you look at the best Wi-Fi routers, they look like aliens with the antenna all over. Ours looks like a very modern, white, sleek, no antennas. And that's the technology that we have, and we're one of the leading Wi-Fi providers for all the operators. But it's big work ahead of us. Job security. Pardon me, about Chinese communication companies, is that what you're asking? I can't. Collaboration of Chinese? So there's a lot. We are working in China. We have a couple offices in China. And I've actually been fortunate to go over and meet with the head of SARF there, which is equivalent to the head of the FCC here in the United States. And there's a lot of consolidation going on, just like you're seeing here in the US with AT&T buying direct, DirecTV and Comcast buying Time Warner. The same thing's happening in China, so there's a lot going on. And working in China is very interesting. We do some manufacturing in Asia, actually mostly in Taiwan. We have, I can't hear you, I'm sorry. You have programs on. To create in China, as we're using the same people of Eris, but it's all in the in-region language, and we're using the images of our people there. When we did the creative refresh, we actually sent photography teams, video teams to Asia, to all our offices to get imagery, because the only way you share the people of Eris is to have all the people. It can't be just where it's convenient for us to travel.
Thank you. Hey,
Pardon me?
yeah, most customers are from the government or from the just private company.
Or most, I can't, sorry, it was,
And most consumers are from the government or they from just private small companies or big companies.
so the China market is heavily regulated as well as subsidized. They control very much what's on TV because it is a communist country, but they also are subsidized in that people pay anywhere from $7 to $14 a month for their services. So very different model than the US, which also makes it very hard. For example, in China, a DVR that you would have in your home, at $14, they can't afford a DVR in their business model. So their model, as they're growing and more people are signing up for services, I think you're going to see the technology advance more, but it's going to take time because of the business models.
Okay, thank you very much.
Uh-huh. The microphone helps.
Any other questions?
So how did you use acquiring Motorola? Because Motorola is kind of more of like a consumer-facing name. How did you use that to market to consumers better? Kind of like the way that Lenovo did with IBM.
Yep. So actually Lenovo now, Motorola is a very large company. There's 3 distinct segments. They have the Motorola Home, they have the handheld business, and then they have all the business that you see, you know, the football, mic systems, little handheld walkie-talkies. And Lenovo's bought all the handheld devices, which makes sense because Lenovo is, you know, very involved. I mean, they're working in PCs and they're working to expand the tablets and everything. We bought the home devices, so that was all the cable modems, set tops. There was a lot of networking equipment in that. Our companies were very similar, but the portfolio actually folded in very nicely because there were areas we were leaders, there's areas where they were leaders, so it just came together. With all of that, the original Motorola that's still doing business, the guys that you see, the football, they have Motorola. We negotiated for a short period of time to have co-branding, so our strategies first put both logos there and long term. That's exactly where we're going. But it's a hard transition, and we're doing research every single quarter to see what the awareness is. And this audience is so much higher, it just shows the technology focus, which I like it.
Your marketing campaign, how did people know that those were people within your group and not just people using your product?
So he was asking, how did people know they were the people of Eris in our campaign? So the fact that the way we've grown in our industry is small, because you think there's a very few customers we sell to. They do know the leading experts because we've had them out there as thought leaders speaking at events all over the world. That's one. They're the people they see in their offices also. And the one key we've done is we don't have our imagery quite as perfect as stock imagery is. So, which are photos that you would buy.
So do you know what responds better, showing people or showing customers using your product versus like collaborating within your company? Do you know which one works better as a marketing?
Which works better? You said
Showing customers using your product versus showing your organization working well together.
So, you know, we haven't done any direct research on if, you know, what works better, showing our own people or customers. Is that what you're saying? But we are working to try to get some images with customers, because just as I mentioned on building your brand, the best thing to do is have people talking about you. Part of our goal this year is to get our customers talking about us. And they are. Some are willing to do some videos and things, and we're actually going to be putting them on our website. And but it's very tricky because there's a lot of, everybody's very guarded with what's said publicly with public companies that are very big, like an AT&T, for example. So, any other questions? Well then,
Well, I'd like to thank Sandy again for coming. Give her another round of applause.
thank
Thank
you.
Sandy.
And great luck. You've started off great.
And just a reminder, if anybody's interested in being a part of the Idea Lab that Eris is doing over in 129C, Danita is the one who's managing that, and you can go and learn a little bit about media, how they consume media, and actually they'll ask you some questions for the part of a survey. So you're welcome to be a part of that as well. Our next iTalk is coming up at 1:15, and that'll be our friend Darren Austin from Alcatel-Lucent, and he'll be talking about merging wireless technology, the next generation uses for your cell phone.
Oh, Mary Beth, Darren Austin. Nice to meet you. Nice to meet you.
Thank you for coming.
Oh, no problem. Thanks for having me. Yeah, we were talking earlier. I teach at Syracuse.
Oh, you do?
In the IST.
What topics are you?
I teach two courses for them. One's
In
called
wireless?
Yeah, in wireless. Yeah, one's called Mobile Network Services, and the other's called Emerging Wireless Technologies. So yeah, both courses I developed. First one was 10 years ago.
Yeah.
It's kind of evolves every year. No 2 years are the same. The way New York.
Okay.
Yes, good old upstate.
Yeah. Those courses are currently taught in our telecommunications department communications.
Gotcha. Okay.
And in fact, one of the person who does most of the teaching, he used to work for Outreach. You probably wouldn't have met him, but he was almost a PhD student with us. He came and took some courses. I teach in usability, and so he came and took some courses with us. Was thinking about that, but now he's like a regular. I guess
Oh, yeah?
you are. Are you on like a fixed term?
Yeah, pretty much.
Contract,
Well, I mean, they
like you
renew me
teach it
every
regularly?
semester.
Every
So I usually
semester,
teach
right.
just one course per
Okay, so
semester.
you're not teaching full
Yeah,
time.
just one night a week,
He's
which
now a full time
kind of
teacher.
fits
Yeah.
from my
Yeah.
my calendar
Yeah, I
between
was gonna
work
say,
and kids
without-
and
yeah.
you know all that
Are
good
you
stuff.
traveling a lot for
Not
work?
too much. You know, I probably travel. I would say once a month on average, and most of it's in the Northeast, so between like Virginia and Boston. So it's not local.
So how'd you get connected into this? Somebody nominated
Yes,
you.
yeah, right. Drew the short straw. No, not at all. Just kidding. No, so I do a lot of these events,
Okay.
and then it sounded like I think the history that I followed. A couple of our customers at Verizon, Nikki Palmer and Dan Mead, are both alum.
Right.
It must be you guys had
We're
gone to them
facilitating, yeah.
to sponsor, so we joined up. They asked us to
Right,
co-sponsor
right.
with them, and then we said, "Hey, can you come down?"
Well, thank you.
So yeah, no, and here I am. So
Did your schedule allow? Yeah, show 'em something.
yeah, I
Is it-
said first time here,
Oh, it's your first time?
first time to Penn State. Yes.
Okay, hopefully not the last time.
I was excited.
We have to show them how we're so much better than Syracuse.
Exactly. That's right. I have not. Not at all. And you know, my son's the older. He's 16. He's a freshman. So, but he hasn't. He'll ask him every now and then. "What do you want?" "Yeah, I don't know." Yeah, exactly. I was impressed just walking. I mean, the half an hour that I've walked around, I'm like,
Well,
wow, this
Our
is.
new dean is coming in from Rochester.
Oh, yeah?
RIT.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yep.
Yep. So we're gonna kind of get used to that kind of New York, New York stuff.
Who's the new dean?
Andrew Sears, is his name. He was directing what probably the closest thing they have to an high school at
Okay.
at
Because,
RIT, but he was just there for 4 years.
Gotcha. The folks at RIT in the telecom program have approached me a couple times in the past 2 years
They heard.
to see.
They
I
heard
don't
you
know.
have these courses.
To see what if any.
How thinly can you spread yourself?
Yes, that's what the discussion came down to. Okay, so you have a full-time job. You're teaching one course at Syracuse. What can we do?
I visited all the SUNY Albany or University,
Yep,
whatever they call
yep.
themselves at Albany, because they're trying to start kind of a night school.
Uh-huh.
They're putting in informatics. So I was up there helping them, with that, and I was amazed not just how well they were using the local expertise
Uh-huh,
like yourself
yep.
to come in and teach courses on a regular basis, but not as full-time faculty.
Yep.
But how committed those, we would call them adjunct faculty. We
Yeah,
don't use
that's-
adjunct faculty
no.
very much. We just
That's what
don't.
That's what
We
they
just
term
don't.
me as well.
Adjunct faculty, but these adjunct faculty, and there must have been, 8 or 10 of them.
Uh-huh.
They so identified the program because they had created courses in many cases
Yeah,
like yourself.
yeah.
They had invested intellectually in it. They would get together on a regular basis and have faculty meetings.
Yeah. I think we're good. I don't know if we want to test this. We want to test it now or in a minute or. Uh-huh. Yes, and I find that as well. Right. Yes.
Academic.
Oops. Sorry. Testing 1 2. Testing. Testing 1 2. Testing. Testing, 1, 2. Testing. Good. Sorry to interrupt there.
Hi, folks. Our next iTalk will be starting in just a couple of minutes. Title of this one is Merging Wireless Technology, Next Generation Uses for Your Cell Phone. Please come on in and be a part of the iTalks. 20 minutes, all about next generation uses for your cell phone. right, ladies and gentlemen, we're just getting ready to start our next iTalk. Our next speaker is Darren Austin from Alcatel-Lucent. The plan for his talk today is merging wireless technology, the next generation uses for your cell phone. Darren?
Oh, hey,
Darren.
Pam. Hey, Pam, I decided to start back here. Appreciate you trying to get people to the front of the room, but I thought I'd make an announcement from back here behind the curtain that during my talk today, I'm actually going to be unveiling the new iPhone 7. We will be giving away free iPads and free puppies. So if you're in the back of the room, you might want to move to the front because this is going to be exciting stuff.
Absolutely. Come on and join us. There he is. I heard a voice, couldn't see a face. Come on in, Darren.
Thank you, Pam. Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Darren Austin, and I have the pleasure, opportunity, job, I guess, to speak to you today about emerging wireless technologies. So what is it that we're seeing in the wireless industry today? So a little bit about myself. I've been in the wireless business now for about 24 years. I started my career at a company called AT&T, moved to Verizon Wireless, spent a number of years there, and for the last 14 years or so, I have been at Alcatel-Lucent. In addition to my day job at Alcatel-Lucent, I also teach in the School of Information Studies at Syracuse University. I've been doing that now for about 10 years. I teach 2 courses for them, one on mobile network services and the other on emerging wireless technologies. So my goal today is to kind of talk to you informally. It's okay to laugh as we go along. As you can see, I'm fairly informal. Talk to you a little bit about what we see in the industry, what's driving our business forward, and really where we see growth in the future. So let me start with a question. And as opposed to raising your hand, why don't you clap if you answer yes here. How many folks use email on their cell phone today? Okay, pretty much everyone, right? Interesting story why I do the clapping. I have 2 teenage kids at home, and I kind of envision the dinner conversation tomorrow night. Well, Dad, how was your trip? Oh, it was pretty good. How was the presentation? Well, I thought it went pretty well. Well, did they clap? Yeah, as a matter of fact, they did. So I appreciate the applause. So some 250 billion emails sent every single day. That's tons and tons of mail being sent electronically each and every day of the year. That's more mail than the U.S. Postal Service delivered in all of 2014. So you may recall a little device known as this, the BlackBerry, and lots of us attribute the growth in email to that particular device, at least the growth in email from a mobile perspective. We have some new interesting statistics that say that more than 50% of all email views are actually done on a mobile device today. So tremendous growth, tremendous opportunity for us in the wireless industry as email continues to kind of proliferate throughout the industry. And that's not even mentioning text messaging, instant messaging, all of those other ways that we communicate. So you can't be in technology today without going a single day without hearing about big data. Am I right? Big data, it's all about big data. So some interesting statistics there. About 3.5 zettabytes of information will be created in the world this year alone. Anybody know what a zettabyte is? A zettabyte is a trillion gigabytes, right? Tons and tons of information. If you were to take those 3.5 zettabytes, that equates to about 75 billion fully loaded iPads. You take those iPads, you stack them one on top of each other, you stack them side by side, you can actually fill Beaver Stadium about 50 times over. So tons and tons of information being generated in the world today. Tons and tons of information. That's the equivalent of every man, woman, and child on Earth tweeting nonstop for 100 years straight. Tons of information. And finally, I'll leave you with this visual. It's the equivalent of covering the continental United States in 3 feet of paper. That's how much information will be generated in this year alone. So let me ask you another question. What is the fastest growing medium for accessing that information? Uploading, downloading, sharing, etc. What would anyone say the fastest growing medium for accessing that information is? The smartphone, right? This is the fastest growing medium for accessing all of that information that's being generated around the world today. That's what leads us again to tremendous growth, tremendous opportunity in the wireless business. Let's talk about video. So video. Netflix and YouTube alone equate to more than 50% of all US internet traffic today. So tons and tons of video content out there in the world today. It's estimated that there's about 4 billion YouTube views each and every single day. More than 24 hours of video uploaded to YouTube every single minute of every single day. What that means is that in 60 days, there's more content produced on YouTube than the 3 major television networks produced in their first 60 years of existence. Every single minute of every single day, tons and tons of video content being generated around the world. So let me ask you another question. Who dares guess what the fastest growing medium for accessing that video content is today? Thank you, you're following along. Yes, the smartphone. Fastest growing medium for accessing that video content that we see being generated around the world today. Again, tons of opportunity, tons of challenges, tons of new stuff that we have the ability to take advantage of from a wireless perspective. Social media. Social media. Let me ask you a question. How many years, well, before I ask the question, let me paint it this way. We're seeing tons and tons of growth in social media, both from a content perspective as well as a subscriber perspective. So when we look at subscribers, how many years do you think it took the radio to reach 50 million subscribers? Anyone have a guess? How many years did it take the radio to reach 50 million subscribers? Anybody? 38 years. 38 years for the radio to reach 50 million subscribers. How about the television? How long did it take the television to reach 50 million subscribers? 10 years? Very close, 13 years. 13 years for the television to reach 50 million subscribers. How about the internet? How long did it take the internet to reach 50 million subscribers? 4 years. How about Facebook? How long did it take Facebook to reach 50 million subscribers? More than 200 million subscribers in year 1 for Facebook. Facebook far surpassed the growth of any major technology advancement we've seen in the last 60, 80, 100 years. And Facebook's only one of them. Like my daughter says, Facebook is simply Instagram for old people, right? So we've got Instagram out there too, right? More than 300 million Instagram users today. That company has grown in subscriber growth rate by more than 50% in the last 9 months alone. Tremendous, tremendous growth from a social media perspective. Final question for the Q&A portion. Who dares guess what the fastest growing medium for accessing social media technology is today? You guessed it, the smartphone. Very smart people here at Penn State. I like that. So again, lots of opportunity, lots of growth, lots of new and exciting technologies when it comes to social media. What does that mean to us in the industry? We know that users expect everything on their mobile device, right? You expect that if there's something in the world that you can connect to or talk to or communicate with, you expect to be able to do that on your mobile device. There's more computing power in the smartphone in your pocket than was on the mainframe computer that guided the first Apollo space mission. Tons of computing power, tons of technology built into this device. I mean, take a look at it, for example. What is it, right? It's your iPod, it's your GPS, it's your e-reader, it's your gaming machine, it's a Wi-Fi hotspot, it's a PC, it's a TV, it's a camera. And oh, by the way, you can make phone calls on it too, right? What's that? So again, lots of opportunities from a device perspective when it comes to the wireless industry. And above and beyond that, we're introduced to it at a very young age, right? So we know that this trend, this phenomena, is not going to die down anytime soon. Users expect everything on their mobile device, and that's the world that we live in today. So when we start to talk about the industry as a whole and what are some of the opportunities and where do we see the growth opportunities and what is the future and, where might I find a job in the industry? I like to boil it down to this, and I use the term wireless DNA. And I'm not talking about this or this. I'm talking about three things: devices, networks, and applications. We can sum up the whole industry in those three terms: devices, networks, and applications. So from a device perspective, whether you're talking about Bluetooth or smartphones in general, you're talking about connected cars or wearable technology, we're continually introducing newer, faster, better, different technology when it comes to a device perspective. What about the network side, right? So that covers the D and the DNA, the devices. From a network perspective, we're focused on two things. Number one, network capacity. How do we keep up with the demand that we're seeing in the marketplace today? And secondly, what about speed? So we're all talking about this fourth generation technology that we've deployed in the marketplace today. At Bell Laboratories and many other companies around the world, we're focused on what the future brings. What is the next generation of technology that we'll introduce into the marketplace that will change the way that you communicate, the way that you connect to the internet? And then from an applications perspective, we really see this opportunity being endless, if you will, right? Hundreds of thousands of applications available in the marketplace today. I do a lot of these events kind of around the Northeast area in particular, and I often get asked the question, what's the next big killer application? And I think the answer to that is fairly simple, and it's we don't know. It's in the head of some 13 or 14-year-old kid who is going to come up with some way to communicate, connect, entertain themselves that we haven't even dreamt up yet, right? And that's what the next killer application is going to be. So really what we're seeing is kind of the shift in the industry and the shift in the market in general away from being connected anytime, anywhere, to simply being connected all the time, everywhere. That's the expectation that people have in today's environment. There was a point in time when you didn't have cell phones at all, or cell phone coverage was very spotty at best. And now today's everybody's expectation is that, hey, I'm going to be able to connect everywhere, anywhere that I go. And I want to be connected all the time to my world. That's the world that we live in today. That's the wireless reality that we see. So those are the opportunities that we see happening from an overall industry perspective. Tons of growth. Wireless is by far one of the fastest growing technologies in the tech industry today, or tech marketplace today. So we don't see that slowing down. Always something new. I know Sandy mentioned earlier, you're always studying, and that's certainly the case. I mean, this technology changes on a daily basis. I mentioned I teach a couple courses at Syracuse. I think that I can say with confidence that no two courses year over year have ever been the same, because what I taught you this year is completely different and new next year. So that opportunity creates a lot of excitement in the wireless industry as a whole. And I think that's really all that I had to share.
Thank you, Darren. We have some time for questions. Does anybody have a question for Darren?
No hard questions, please. Don't ask where you pick up your puppy or your iPad.
I have a question.
I don't know off the top of my head. I'm sorry.
What was
Anybody
the
know? The question was, what are the stats on Snapchat?
What are the stats on Snapchat?
The problem with Snapchat is we can't track it because it just disappears. How's that for an answer? That's good. No, I don't know the Snapchat. But yes, you're right. And the interesting thing is, when we look at that as a whole from an applications perspective, so being the father of two teenagers, what we think we learned today, Snapchat, tomorrow it's something different, right? So they're on to some new and different application that mom and dad don't know about. But good question. I actually, on a side note, I did attend a seminar that was put on by the local sheriff's department where I live, and their investigator of cyber crimes. And he shared some alarming information and statistics. So some of the new ones that he mentioned, an app called Yik Yak. I don't know if folks are familiar with that. Probably the question is better directed, instead of the middle-aged guy on stage in a sport coat, the question is probably better directed over here, What are those applications that we should be looking out for, right? So, and again, so social media being, a very exciting opportunity for us, it's also a very concerning opportunity, especially as you're raising children in today's society. So, other questions? Yeah, go ahead.
So what does Alcatel-Lucent see as like the next technology, wireless technology that's going to be emerging?
I heard you. So what is the next technology, right? So some of the things that we're working on in Bell Labs, obviously there's, double top secret stuff, and then there's stuff that we're getting. Yeah, that's the one you want to know about. Let's see. I like my job. Is Penn State willing to hire me full time? Yeah, so the biggest thing that we see from a wireless perspective is kind of what's the next generation of technology going to be. And from that perspective, I mean the network itself, right? So today we have LTE. You've probably heard of that term. Long-term evolution is what it stands for. What we're working on right now is looking to launch what we call LTE Advanced. LTE Advanced is simply carrier aggregation. So without getting too technical, we take the amount of spectrum that we have available, we aggregate that and deliver that to you for maybe a particular application. So let's say you're sitting here streaming a video, and Pam's sitting there just checking her email. We can recognize the difference in the two bandwidth requests. We can deliver you up to 100 megabits per second, and we can keep her on just best effort data, right? She doesn't realize as she's checking her email that you're getting 100 megabits per second and she's only getting 2. So that's really what you'll start to see towards the end of this year. You'll start to see us talk a little bit about carrier aggregation and the move to LTE Advanced. So, yeah, that's a big debate, right? Yes. The service providers are very concerned with that, right? So, in terms of how that relates to network neutrality, we see, as long as we're not negatively impacting Pam's experience, then we think that we should be okay from a net neutrality perspective, right? So we're looking at it as, hey, the application, the variance in the application will demand different levels of bandwidth, and if we're able to provide that and still not detract from Pam's experience, then we should be okay from a net neutrality perspective. So.
Any other questions for Darren?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Do your labs have anything? What do you what do you contribute to like the consumer market? Do you guys do a lot of work with them, or? So
here in the U.S. and I may is anybody here from Alcatel-Lucent? I just want to make sure. Yeah. So in the U.S., what do we provide from a consumer or enterprise perspective? That's relatively limited at this point of time. We do see, like in other countries around the world, we do have devices. So we're actually in the smartphone business. So we have devices. But here in the U.S., you don't really see that. We're starting to spend more time on the enterprise market as a company here in North America. Really what we have to deliver is carrier-grade routers, telecom equipment that we're looking to mold into the enterprise space. So how do we take that carrier-grade router and bring that into an enterprise environment? So that's really where we see our play. And some would argue, anybody here from Cisco, but some might argue that their strength is in the enterprise space and have tried to evolve their business into the carrier space. The opposite is really true of Lucent or Alcatel-Lucent. We kind of grew up in the carrier space and are now trying to bring those products into the enterprise space. So hopefully a lot of growth there, or it's a big opportunity that we've identified within the company. So, other questions?
Well,
All
let's
right.
give Darren a great big hand and thank him very
Thank
much
you.
for coming. Thank you, Darren.
Thank you.
Our next iTalk, our final iTalk for the day, will start at 2 o'clock this afternoon. That's Ben Eisenberg from PricewaterhouseCoopers, and he'll be talking about PwC's digital business impact plus creativity, a focus on wearable future. 2 o'clock.
Test.
think so. Looking pretty good.
These days, it seems like wherever there's a what if, there's a wearable.
Yep. Should be good there. I can't find the pause button for the video. I just kind of hit all the keys to stop it from talking. Yeah, just sort of loaded. If not, as long as we have good web connection, I can pull up the web.
I sanitized it for you, so thank you.
It's all right. We have it.
No, it's okay. Just want to make sure it doesn't have any. No, that doesn't. The headset goes around your ear, and then you adjust it how you want it, and try to make it as close as you can to your mouth without actually,
Like that.
yeah.
Okay.
And then we'll turn it on, and you can test it.
Test. Test one. I think I hear it. And turn it.
Yes, sir. You'll be all clear. And please, no one else is mic'd except for Pam. But if somebody has a question and they're not microphoned or something like that, we don't get to them on time, just repeat the question. Yeah. And the people at home can.
Makes sense. Very good.
All right.
I guess I'm.
And I got your clicker here for you if you want to start your
Test,
PowerPoint real
test.
quick.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Our last of our iTalks will be beginning at 2 o'clock here at the stage. Our speaker will be Ben Eisenberg from PricewaterhouseCoopers, and the topic will be PwC Digital, Business Impact plus Creativity, a focus on a wearable future. Please join us.
And check out your video one more time. I just want to make sure.
Try it from the wall here.
Just the sound.
Like wherever there's a what if, there's a wearable. Everyone is talking about wearable technology. The category is expected to
Going on in the back, you might want to make it a little louder, I guess.
Okay. And how does the camera pick it up? Is it mic or is it direct plugged in?
The mic is going to be different sound, so you're completely fine there. But it's actually picking up from over here.
So I mean, no. Okay, got it. For the video. For the audio on the video, when I play the video, so that'll just have to hear what's
Exactly. We have it set up that whatever
right, ladies and gentlemen, we are ready for our third and final iTalk for the afternoon. Our next speaker is Ben Eisenberg. He is with PricewaterhouseCoopers and a Penn State alum, IST alum, I might say. And Ben is going to talk to us today about PwC Digital, Business Impact plus Creativity, a focus on the wearable future. Take it away, Ben.
All right. Thank you very much, Pam, and thank you all for coming out today. I assume you can hear me okay with the microphone. Great. So thanks for coming out in person. Hello to everyone who's watching on the internet here or from one of the Commonwealth campuses. Pleasure to be back on campus again today. What I've been asked to talk about and tying together the theme of innovation here is some of the research that PwC has recently done around the wearable future. So maybe just to start out, how many of you have what you'd qualify as a wearable device right now? All right, pretty good for those on the video. We have a handful of folks in the room raising their hand. Right, not surprising, given where we are. We'll talk a little bit about why you're an early adopter, where the market's heading, some of the research we've done into consumer preferences. So first off, though, let me introduce myself. So I am a Penn State alum, IST alum, as Pam said, from '04. So my last semester here was the year the IST building opened, and also have a master's from the College of Comms as well. At PwC, I'm a director in our Entertainment, Media, and Communications group on our advisory side, which basically means that I've spent the last 11 years since graduating here at the firm helping pretty large telecom clients and some other media outlets understand and tackle some of their biggest challenges related to divestitures, cost reduction, developing new innovation, over-the-top video, mobile advertising, some really interesting, pressing things today. But today we'll touch on wearables. And let me start off by talking a little bit about the Consumer Intelligence series. Right, this is what kicked off our wearables research. So we started something called the Consumer Intelligence series about 7 years ago. And the purpose of it was to understand better what preferences consumers have around different technologies, different entertainment and media, content that's out in the ecosystem, really just trying to understand how do we look at what consumer preferences are and tailor those to what our clients are looking for and how they launch new technologies, new media products, etc. So for wearables, it started by taking the group that we had out in LA and doing some brainstorming around how wearables are going to impact 20 different industry groups. And then we launched that further. We said, let's do some consumer research, and did a survey with about 1,000 responses, or 1,000 respondents. Got back their preferences on all different types of wearables, analyzed that, tied it in with 5.5 million social posts that we were monitoring over 6 months to understand consumer sentiment online. And then we held 2 salon sessions, one in New York and one in San Francisco, with various experts in the wearables space to understand their views on where the ecosystem is headed. So a lot of the research I'm going to present today really came out of that research the firm did. All right, so first, let's just, before we even get into any of the key findings, let's just set a baseline for what is wearables. Because as we spoke to the experts, as we interviewed consumers and did focus groups, and as we talked about it as a team, really found that we had to first define it, right? What is it? And the easiest way is anything with the word smart in front of it, right? Smart watch, smart glasses, you know, you can get to Fitbits and fitness bands, a lot of other devices that are going to be physically on the body. And if you think of this as a natural extension, right, look at the path of technology, right? When I wrote my thesis for my master's in telecom, what I looked at was the history of telephony and how it went all the way from, you know, a phone that was just one phone in your town all the way to a cell phone, right? In the last 11 years, we've seen that proliferate even further into smartphones, right, and onwards. But if you take that trend, if you take a phone for your town, and then a phone that was in your house, and then a phone that was in your kitchen, then to your bedroom, continuing to get more personal. Then you take a look at computing, right? You had a desktop that sat on your desk. Then it's a laptop, which gave you some portability. Then you tie together the phone angle with the laptop angle, and you get to a smartphone, right, which is truly with you all day, right? The wearables is the next piece of that trend. If I continued that thesis, I wrote it today, this is probably what I would have been touching on, is how the wearables are coming out now, and that's an even more personalized device. It's the next generation of that of the technology, and it's really, in my view, the one stop before you truly just have a matrix style, kind of like implanting it right in your mind. You know, you look at like Google Glass or the smart glasses. those really are putting a screen directly in front of your eye. It's like the last step before you have something just directly imported into your brain. So from a cultural standpoint, from a society standpoint, how these devices are used, how we will use them, is really going to create some interesting trends, and so some of the things we looked about from consumer preferences. Before I go further here, let me stop and play a short video that we prepared that's going to talk a little bit about the research in more depth and also some of the high-level findings, and then I'll go into it in a little bit more detail.
These days, it seems like wherever there's a what if, there's a wearable. Everyone is talking about wearable technology. The category is expected to hit $14 billion in sales this year and swell to $70 billion within a decade. Today, our research shows that 1 in 5 Americans own some type of wearable technology, which includes smart glasses, smart watches, fitness bands, and smart clothing. This adoption rate mirrors that of tablets, which sat at only 20% at the 2-year mark and rocketed to roughly 44% 2 years later. Just as consumers and business quickly caught on to the appeal and utility of tablets, signs indicate that they'll catch on to wearables too. For consumers, our research revealed 3 big opportunities. First, safety. 90% of people say it's important for wearable technology to help parents keep their children safe. Second, health. More than 80% of consumers say healthy living and medical care access are important benefits of wearable tech. And third, simplicity. 83% list simplification and improved ease of technology as a key category benefit. Within enterprise, wearable tech could become a necessity too, just as the tablet has emerged as a powerful point-of-sale device and a valuable tool for doctors. Already, manufacturers are using wearable glasses for hands-free productivity. Sports teams are using wearable garments to measure body movements, and advertisers are clamoring to use wearable tech to drive even more engaging and targeted ads. Done right, wearable technology can benefit the employee experience, the end consumer experience, and the company's bottom line. Of course, all of this comes with a potential dark side too. How far is too far will be a question companies must always ask. But one thing is for sure, there is indeed a wearable future, and it's poised to be a game-changing one. How will wearable tech impact your business and society as we know it? Visit pwc.com/CIS to find out.
All right, so I don't think the firm is winning any awards for animation, but hopefully you all got a little bit of a hint to some of the research that we did there and some of where we think wearables are going, right? And I neglected to mention that this Consumer Insight series, as it would sound with the word series, we have a whole bunch of different ones. You can see the website that came up at the end there, pwc.com/CIS. We did one on mobile advertising recently I worked on. We actually have one coming out this week on the sharing economy, around like using Uber and Airbnb and the changes that's going to have to society. So more of those type of videos online if you're interested in those other topics. But let's jump into some of the findings related to specifically wearables, right? So you might have heard it say on the video that in 2012 tablets were at 20% and 2 years later they jumped up to 40. So by the end of 2014, when we finished this research a couple months ago, wearables were also right around that benchmark here, around 21%. So the real question is, what is 2016 going to look like? You know, in 2016, are we going to all be wearing Fitbits and Apple Watches? Are we going to have heart monitoring devices? Are we going to have some of the other interesting things you saw in the video and some of the other ones we'll talk about here in a moment? You know, I'm sure many of you have seen the S-curve, the adoption curve, or talked about it in some of the IST classes. That's what we expect wearables to be like. Right now we're at the early adopter stage. And, you know, over the next 12 months, we would see that, you know, 45% of people think they're going to get a fitness band. 35% think they'll adopt some type of smartwatch. 20% some type of smart clothing, which, to be honest, I'm not even sure how much of that is out on the market today. But it's coming. There's going to be different applications for it, especially in the healthcare space. So what we found just particularly interesting, if I jump back to my notes here, is when we talked with consumers, right, about what devices they would want to get, there was more than just wearable utility in the discussion. People were talking about fashion. People were talking about the joy it would bring them to interact with the device. People talked about the entertainment and the social experience they want to use the device for. Very different than some of the earlier technologies you saw, like if you were shifting from a desktop to a laptop like we talked about, or earlier from a cell phone to a smartphone. So people are building up on those earlier trends and really trying to extend their use of a smart device into their everyday lives. And people aren't looking to use a wearable to replace a smartphone. 76% of people that we spoke to said they would use it as a complementary device. Now, human-centered design is something that I know we take very seriously in IST, and so I'll just take a second to touch on it to say that I think as far as wearables are concerned, human-centered design is either going to propel or kill various devices, right? So who does human-centered design really, really well? Who might be coming out with a wearable, say, next week on the 24th? Right? Okay, right. Apple iWatch, right? Or the Apple Watch. Right? Apple is trying to do something that really no one else has done yet in the wearables game. Make something that's really elegant and focused around how a consumer wants to communicate and interact with that device. Right? You look at some of the earlier products that came out in the last 2 years, you know, they weren't heavily adopted. And is that because they were too early, or was that because the device manufacturers really didn't hit the mark in how this device is going to be integrated into people's lives? Right? It needs to be something that, if it's going to be something you're wearing on your wrist every day, not only do you want it to look fashionable, but it's something that you have to think about, how is the user going to interact with this? You can't just take what's on the smartphone and make it on a tinier screen. You actually have to develop new use cases, new instances where the device will be used. Apple generally is a killer at that, and I would expect that just like with the iPhone or Apple Pay or anything else they've released, when they really have improved upon the human-centered design, you see a lot of other fast followers come afterwards, and that's when the market usually starts to take off. All right, so as far as wearables go, there's a lot of opportunity, like I was saying, that right now has unmet needs. The graphic's a little small, so let me just touch on a couple ones. One of them is that wearable devices have the ability really to improve workforce training right now. Right, so it can improve productivity. And we'll touch on an example with Google Glass in a moment. But basically, in the right scenario, a lot of wearables can be ways that employers can improve the way their employees currently do work today, especially in repeatable functions and assembly lines, things like that. We'll touch on that more in a second. Stress reduction through more streamlined technology and human-centered design came up frequently in a lot of the research that we did. People don't like interfacing with their smartphone when they have to type significant messages, or people don't like interfacing with their laptop when they want to be somewhere really mobile. So if you start looking at things like a watch or a fitness band, there's other applications that inherently are built into the way that device is designed that you're not going to see in existing technologies. And when used properly in these right human-centered design use cases we talked about, it actually can reduce stress in the participants. Improve personal accountability. That really gets to a lot of, say, the healthcare uses, you know, like a Fitbit that tracks your steps. People are very interested in right now understanding how their how their health is being monitored. The question is, how do you take that to the next level and really make it a closed-loop design, which we're not seeing just yet. And then the last one I'll touch on from here is the marketing aspects. You know, anywhere there's a screen, there's an opportunity for an advertiser. And from an entertainment and media background, you know, you take a look at adding another device, particularly one like on a watch or on a band. How is content going to be delivered, and who's going to pay for that content? There's probably going to be some type of ad-supported revenue model, and how do users interact with that is a whole nother ecosystem that still needs to be developed. All right, so when we talk about what consumers, though, see as the benefit of using these devices, you know, I'll touch on a couple. I already mentioned the stress reduction piece and the goal-oriented behavior. But how about strengthening connections with family and friends? All right, that came up repeatedly in some of the information that we saw here, that there's a real concern right now that when you have to do things with a tablet or a laptop, you're putting a barrier between you and somebody else. You know, for example, my notes for the presentation are on this tablet, and every once in a while you'll catch me looking down at it. Right? How different would it be if I was delivering that with Google Glass, where I had the words literally right across my glasses, and I can maintain eye contact with you, throughout the entire presentation? Take it outside of a presentation realm. What if it's just in a meeting at work or a one-on-one conversation with a friend? It might be creepy at first, right? But there's some different attributes here and different use cases that when done properly can really remove a barrier in the communication. Get more time out of the day. We talked a little bit about some of the productivity aspects. I mentioned that a moment ago. And then improving customer service. You know, when you start looking at the way that phones or other wearables can be used to enhance the customer experience, the more that a business can understand about you and your situation, the better they can tailor the relationship to the consumer. And so what better data can they get than something that's literally on you 24 hours a day? Again, there's some privacy implications there, but if you're willing to share that with marketers, with advertisers, with stores that you enter, they can better direct you and better understand your needs and help you with the customer experience. Touch a little bit on millennials because this came up in some of the research as well, and I'll just read some of the facts off here if you'll let me. By 2020, so the end of the decade, 47% of the workforce is going to be millennials. So this demographic, as you can imagine, was more enthusiastic about adopting wearables than we saw with other demographics in the research. So specifically, millennials are 55% more likely to own wearables than adults that were over the age of 35. And very interesting statistic, I thought, millennials were also twice more likely than adults to adopt a wearable device if a retailer or entertainment or media company or health insurance company was willing to pay for it. So that trade-off of getting past the cost barrier, right? I'm willing to use it if someone else gives it to me. Naturally, they're not giving it to you for free, so there's some privacy trade-offs. So interesting to see some of that come up in the research. On the flip side, parents that you see on the top here. So parents are twice as likely to own wearable tech. And when we looked into that a little bit further, we found that it had to do with going back to that friends and family piece, using wearable technology to understand things their children are doing, be it tracking, be it understanding their preferences, be it monitoring health. There was a lot of mood and happiness levels that came up, we were told, and understanding if their kids are happy or what they're up to. So these were two of the groups that really stood out in the research as being willing to adopt wearables. But who's not willing to adopt wearables was equally interesting. The number wasn't particularly large, but it was meaningful enough. 9% of the respondents said that they would not wear a smart device. And of those who had a smart device for a year, you can see that 31% of the people who had some type of people tracking device, which is loosely categorized, stopped using it after the first year. Fitness bands were dropped by 36% of people after the first year. Smart watches, 36, smart glasses, 35, and smart clothing, 40%. So what does this mean? You know, I can speak to it personally. I had a Nike Fuel Band, which was part of a company-sponsored fitness program, and we had to report our fitness every week. It was a competition. And so you had to say how many days you met your goal, how many steps you walked, and during the 6 weeks of that competition, I was using the band thoroughly. And, you know, I'd look at it at, say, 11 o'clock at night, because it reset every midnight, you know, your stats reset. And if I didn't make my step count, I literally would just walk around my apartment in a circle around the couch until I met my goal, right? So, one, I learned that I was a very competitive person, but two, it also helped me get my step count up. But after 6 weeks, when the firm stopped the competition, got the data they wanted, and said, okay, you can keep the devices, you know, feel free to use them, you just don't have to report in anymore, I rapidly found I stopped using it to the point where I'm not wearing it today. Nothing against the band. I think that the technology was a little early. You know, I'd rather have better battery life, have a clock on all the time, so I don't, you know, I can look at a glance. There were some things I didn't like about it, but at the end of the day, I found that I was a very competitive person, and once they stopped making it a competition against your peers on how well you were doing, I stopped using it. So that gets back to the human-centered design. You know, people will buy these devices, but how do you actually hit the different niche and the different motivating factors for why people are buying the devices to make sure they continue to use them? There were other concerns that people brought up. Some of these I thought were really interesting. So the privacy one, 82%, I can't imagine anyone here is surprised by that. People get freaked out when there's any new technology, right? Are they tracking me? But then you look at how you're being tracked every day by Facebook, by Google, by what your smartphone's doing. I mean, this is not going to be any different. And for this generation now, you know, folks graduating from IST now, you know, it's kind of the norm, right? But some of the other ones I thought were really interesting on here. Hurt our ability to relate to other humans, 72%, what we were talking about earlier. Turns us into robots, 52%. I can't believe half the people came up with that response. But generally there's skepticism we found in the research, and there's letdown. There were a lot of hype around wearables the last couple years, and we're still waiting to see some of that come to fruition. Again, I think once the HCD is improved, you'll see it starting to meet the hype. This is one of the more fascinating ones, though, at least from my vantage point, because one of the things that I looked at a lot when I was an IST major was really the intersection of how technology was impacting business and society, and how society and business was impacting technology. So you take that business angle, right? How are enterprises using wearables? Enterprises actually, we believe, are going to be one of the largest adopters of wearables and one of the earliest adopters. Right? Once you get past kind of the geeks who want to go out and get Google Glass as soon as they come out, there's a lot of use cases in business where this will improve productivity, where it will improve employee performance. One of the things we actually found was that wearables could increase employee morale because it could make the jobs employees doing easier. So like if any of you have ever seen Amazon's warehouse, for example, right? Sometimes I've seen like CNBC does, behind the company stuff. They actually all wear wearable barcode scanners in the warehouses. And so this way it's a lot easier for them to scan products as they're grabbing them off the shelves versus having to take them to a workstation and scan them on a machine, or even have like a gun that comes in a holster and scan it, right? By taking that step out, it's a lot easier for the for the employee. UPS, I think, or FedEx, one of the two, same things. They actually worked with Symbol to create scanners that go on the fingertips, so they can scan all those barcodes as the packages come through. Right, so take that one step further. Let's think about Google Glass for a second. So I want to show you another video that we have here. This is actually an actual project that we did for an insurance company. I can't name the company, but I think you'll find the video pretty fascinating here, and we'll talk about it for a second at the end.
Some things have been done the same way for a long time. For years, insurance adjusters walked around with big industry books and notepads. Now they have mobile offices and sit behind laptops most of the day. We think it's time for a change. Using advancements in technology to make us more human. Changing "I can't find your place" to "I'll be right there." Let's make the best of a stressful experience by helping our customers feel more like people. Let's turn a bad day into a better day. Trading digital cameras for wearable computers. And swap big books for big data. Let's go from waiting to participating. From asking questions to getting answers. Instantly. Let's change the process from 50 minutes of anxiety into 15 minutes of conversation. Let's get you squared away. Right away. It's time to change our expectations of what a great experience can be. And change what we've done for years to what we'll do tomorrow. So we can get you back on the road. I think it's time for a change.
Like I said, that was an actual project that we did for a pretty big insurance company that wanted to take a look at the way claims adjusters worked out in the field and really revolutionize the process. Right? If any of you have ever unfortunately been in a car accident, you know the adjuster eventually shows up, usually has a clipboard, digital camera, takes pictures, has to go back to a laptop, upload them, has to write on the clipboard, go back, type it into the computer. Days later, the report's filed. Here, the use case that we came up with them that they're going to be launching is actually using Google Glass, as you can tell. So it can take pictures of exactly what the claim adjuster is looking at, goes directly to the adjuster's tablet. The data they provide is no longer on a clipboard. Type it right into the tablet. And if you caught near the end, everything was itemized. There was an actual dollar amount put on, and hit submit, and it goes right to the phone of the insurance customer that was standing there. So, going back to how wearables can be used for consumers, how they can be used for businesses, got to come up with the right use cases. And once we have those use cases defined, that's when they'll start changing society, changing the way we do business. You can't just bring a device to market because it's kind of cool and hip, which is how wearables have been done the last couple of years. As we start coming up with these next generation use cases, that's when you'll start seeing society get impacted by it. That video, by the way, was put together by our digital group. Actually, I have another one that if we have time, I'll show you here at the end around mobile uses in a retail store, which is kind of cool. But basically, PwC has acquired 10 different companies that are at the forefront of digital marketing and digital transformation over the last 2 years. Grouped them together in PwC Digital now to have an end-to-end strategy to execution approach. And little known fact, we're actually now the single largest mobile agency in the U.S. and the 10th largest digital agency. So we have basically 2,000 plus employees, and 25% of the Fortune 100 are doing projects with PwC around digitizing or optimizing a lot of the business they're doing through digital processes, kind of like this Google Glass example. So a lot of neat stuff we do. We're not just an auditing company, which we do a lot of auditing and assurance work, but I'm on the much cooler, consulting side. All right, so back to wearables. Just quickly, as we have a few minutes left, talk about the implications of wearables. Analytics is a huge piece of this. You can't just launch a device and take the same thing you were putting on a smartphone or a laptop and throw it onto a smartphone, or sorry, a smartwatch. Really got to take a look at the analytic angle of it. What type of data is out there, and then what type of information does the consumer really want to have at their fingertips or on their wrist or on a smart piece of clothing or whatever it is. So you have to analyze that. There's analytics to understand the consumer sentiment, and then also there's analytics that go into understanding how to turn that data into information. Location, for example, and geographical context is huge. And in the mobile advertising work that I mentioned I did last year, you saw a lot of that come up. You don't necessarily, when you're in the middle of your day at work or when you're in the middle of a class here, want to get an advertisement for something. But when you walk past that store, there's some geographical context that now might be a good time to deliver that. You probably have seen there's a use case that American Airlines has for delivering a boarding pass on the Apple Watch when it comes out next week. I think that's on the commercial that Apple's been showing. Having that boarding pass load on your watch when you actually walk to the gate would be a great opportunity, You don't need that boarding pass when you're in the car. You don't need it when it's 3 days earlier. But adding the GPS location-based capabilities here to take that data and make sense of it contextually to say, hey, I'm at the gate, pull up the boarding pass for me. Once the wearables start making things easier for the consumer is when they'll start having more usefulness for the rest of society. Other implications, we have to look at where the white space is, what's being done today, where is there room for wearables. You don't want to replace things that are really working well, but look for that white space, where the opportunities are to grow into the wearables market. Look at the benefits to consumers as well as the benefits to enterprise. Companies don't launch things out of altruism. They do it because there's some type of profit motive behind it. So understanding what's in it for the enterprise, but also they have to understand what's in it for the consumer. Consumers aren't going to pick it up just because it's cool. It really has to fit what the consumers want to do with the device. So that ties into where the potential value is, understanding how a lot of the wearables can be monetized, to get more advertisers or get more device manufacturers into the game. There'll be areas for partnerships you'll see. Companies who traditionally did not work together will partner. Trust, however, if you go back to the privacy conversation, trust is really the foundation we saw in the consumer research. Consumers won't adopt it if it's from a company they don't feel they have a trusted relationship from, or if they feel like the device is doing more benefit to that company than it is to the consumer itself. And lastly, wearables will evolve. What was launched 2 years ago is not the same as what's being launched today, and it's certainly not going to be the same as what's going to be launched 2 years from now. So companies we've been talking to, we're advising them to make sure they look to the future. By the time they launch their use cases for wearables, they really have to think a couple years ahead to what the market's going to look like. Similarly, for all of you, anyone who ends up in a role helping develop some of this next generation of wearables, really think of where society's headed, where the market's headed. All right, so with that, again, if you want more information on the wearables, pwc.com/CIS is where we have this information and all the other research that we've done in the different parts of the consumer information series over the last 7 years. A lot of good information up there on, we had a recent one on changing the game around video and over the top, mobile advertising one I mentioned, sharing economy, a lot of really good information up here. And for anyone who's going to be back on campus next year, so sorry seniors, but any of the other underclassmen, you know, PwC has a recruiting app to stay connected with students on campus. This talk, as well as everything else that we do on campus, is here on the app. So I have instructions on the side how to download it, but you can get bios for everyone we bring to campus and see all the events that we're going to be doing. So we're largely wrapped up for the year now, since the semester's coming to a close soon. But we'll be back in the fall and plenty of opportunities to connect. All right, so with that, pause, see if anyone has any questions, or either on this topic or anything in general. All right. All right, thank you.
Questions, anyone? Here, I'll.
Hi. I noticed your one of your slide. One of the biggest things with wearables was the privacy concern, right? Do you know of what is being done in terms of like cryptography or things along those lines to ensure that they're safe and private and all of that?
I can't speak specifically to technologies that are being used for it. Our research didn't go that far in depth. We were looking more at the consumer sentiment side. What I found really interesting, though, in some of the research that we did around the privacy angle of it, is that there's a trade-off between what consumers are willing to take as a benefit and how much privacy they're willing to give up. And it's a complete pendulum, basically, right? If you see benefits in what the device will do for you, you know, the respondents said they were willing to give up more aspects of their privacy. If they were not seeing the benefit directly, then people were more cautious about accepting it and accepting the privacy trade-offs that take place. So we looked at it generically like that. We didn't go into specifically cryptography or anything like that. But it definitely, as you think about that being one of the biggest barriers to adoption, is going to be a huge issue for, you know, companies in the wearable game to solve. Yeah. Good question. All right.
Other questions?
Any others?
Just researching all this information on wearable technology, do you see yourself in the PwC, even just PwC, do you see them adopting some of this technology? Since you say it's going to be big in the future, you see them somehow, I don't know where it would you know, benefit them, but do you think there might be some areas?
So that's a great question. So I mentioned that we did adopt Nike Fuel Bands a couple years ago as a pilot, and that pilot was for healthcare, right? They really wanted to see if there was a correlation between wearing the bands and improving the activities that we take, that theoretically the more you move is going to make us healthier, which then would lower the firm's healthcare costs. And you can see that application across every company that provides healthcare to their employees, right? So healthcare, fitness bands, all that stuff, I think a lot of companies will be adopting, because healthcare costs are significant and they're rising, and it's really a problem for a lot of big companies. They can if they can give all employees a $100 fuel band, but reduce the amount they pay in premiums by $1,000 a year, it's a great trade-off. So I think companies are going to do that. Other wearables on here, as those use cases get generated, I'm sure we'll adopt them. I mean, you could see we have tablets, we have smartphones, we have laptops, you know, all the other technology that's out there. As we see a business need, as it helps us interact with our clients, we'll certainly adopt those as well. Yeah. Okay. All right. Any other questions? Yes, Evan.
So I was just wondering if there's been any work or that you know of done on like the standardization of wearables, since it's still in such an early phase, but thinking about actually turning that data into useful information. Like for example, there's like everybody's making a fit band.
Yeah.
But like unless you have something like Apple's like Health Kit to actually integrate that all together and actually start to make some useful information out of it,
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't have as much value.
Yeah.
So do you do any research on, I don't know, what would actually help turn that into more useful information?
Yeah, so I'll speak to that a little bit. Again, we didn't go in depth into the technology specifically around, the different communication standards. But what I can speak to is, there's two different ways of standards are set. You either have de jure standard settings or you have de facto standard settings. And so de jure standard settings would imply that it's of law. There's some rule, right? So a standard is created, like when, when Bluetooth was created. There's a Bluetooth working group that created exactly what that technological standard should be that all the different device manufacturers adopted. Same thing with 802.11, or any other technology. But then you have the other one that's, I think, even a little bit more fascinating, which is the de facto standard setting. And a lot around de facto standard setting all has to do with where the money is. So companies are unwilling to adopt someone else's standards if they're not going to get a portion of the revenue. So take connectors on your smartphone, for example, right? Android devices use USB. Why don't Apple devices use USB? Right? Why do they use that lightning adapter? It's proprietary, and Apple has licensed that adapter to every other company out there that wants to make an accessory that plugs into the lightning port. So Apple is making money off every iHome product, every third-party device that plugs into it. They have to license that lightning plug, that chip, basically. Same thing, I think, with the connectivity you're going to see between wearables, right? Apple is not going to just let anyone connect to their wearables unless there's some type of revenue-sharing model that enables it to be beneficial for Apple. So you'll see others that create competing standards that want to have an open-source framework that are not as interested in that. So you'll have different camps, more or less. And how de facto ends up becoming the set standard is basically adoption in society, right? Where you have the largest group of people adopting it. So the way Apple gets away with this is they have such a large base of iPhone users. They're going to have such a large base of iWatch users and Apple Pay users. They can get away with setting whatever standards they want. But smaller companies that are trying to get into the wearable game are not going to have that type of clout, and they'll end up having to inherit the standards that others have created and potentially pay to use them.
So I was just thinking, if you're wearing 20 different sensors, how are they actually becoming one?
Yeah, and that'll get to a problem, right? Because then you get to where consumers don't want that, right? Consumers don't want to have 20 different chargers laying around. They don't want to have 20 different things that don't communicate. So someone will solve that problem, but it's always like a pendulum swinging back and forth. And the companies very much try to move that pendulum all the way as far as they can to get the revenue out of it. And then eventually it has to swing back to centers when consumers have refused that model. So good questions, though. All right, any others?
Well, let's thank Ben for coming out very much.
All right.
Thank you, Ben.
Thank you all very
Appreciate
much.
it.
Yep.
And with that, our iTalk series is over, but we still have lots of technology out front in the front floor, so please go check out the Oculus and all the other cool stuff that's going on out there. Go blip something.